In the past few years, I started playing indie games, and I've come to really, really love them and have a whole lot of respect for them. Because oftentimes it's like one person that creates everything, and that includes all the coding, the story writing, the design of it, and then even the music as well, which just boggles my mind. Because I've spent so long just trying to learn how to do music, and I'm still not amazing at it. And then there's these people that just do it on top of all this other stuff. It's crazy to me. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the music because I'm definitely not well suited to talk about all the other technical sides of indie games. So let's talk about music and why indie game music is so daggum good. First off, the music in these indie games have so much attention put to them, it's really crazy. For example, if it's just one person that's making the whole game, they're putting so much of their energy and time into it, and everything is so meaningful. Because even if you get an awesome job scoring someone's game, you're not as emotionally and personally invested in it as if you were someone that made the whole thing. A great example of this is the game To the Moon, which is one of the first indie games I played, and it's still to this day, it's still one of my favorite games in general that I've ever played. But To the Moon and all the games that came after it in the series and are still coming out have amazing music that completely tie itself in with the story and the characters. There's this attention to detail there that really couldn't be replicated if there were two people working on it, if the music was done by someone totally different. Because Ken from Freebird Games, who created the games and the music, he puts so much, he puts all these little ideas into the music, and he kind of hints towards things that are going to happen later in the story, because he has the story all mapped out in his head, or we assume. But you can just see these little things that can only be there because he was the sole creator of everything within the game. You can also see this attention to detail in Stardew Valley and Doki Doki Literature Club and other games like that, because they were all created by just one person, or primarily just one person. And the amount of attention that goes into the music is crazy. But even in situations where an indie game does bring on an outsourced composer, there's still, because it's such a, there's no red tape, there's no big budget games, it's just a guy that's hey, I've been working on this game for a few years, will you do the music? And there's the relationship there is very different from something for the new Last of Us game that's coming out. I imagine that just the way people are communicating between how they creatively want to make the game, it's a very different atmosphere from something in a big budget world. So with indie games, like for example, Bastion, that's an awesome game with really, really cool music, and the music does a great job of enhancing the story, and you can tell that there was a lot of talk between the composer and the game developers as they were creating the game. There's a guy on YouTube named Jake who did an awesome video on Bastion. I'll have a link down in the description, you should go check it out. But he goes over how the music enhances the story and creates this really cool atmosphere for the game. So you should go check that out, it's really interesting. But in addition to all this story supporting and close attention and such, indie games often have very unique sounding music, like Fez or Cuphead or Hollow Knight, games like that. This probably goes back to there not being as much red tape. People are more, there's not as much pressure in some ways, and people are more likely just to go for something that is going to be interesting. Like with Cuphead, for example. That, first off, the way that they hand drew everything in that game, very interesting. If you haven't looked into Cuphead, you should do so. But the music in it is really cool, but it's got this jazz, it's very much got this jazz influence to it, and it's very unique. It's not something you would normally hear in a video game. So, because it's an indie game, you get to see really cool stuff like that in the music, and that's not something we normally get outside of the indie world. One of the last things that really draws me to indie music is how detailed and how advanced some of the interaction is with the music. So one of the things that, if you're not familiar with this, one of the things that sets video games apart from any other type of scoring, like film scoring, or for example, is the fact that it's interactive. So that means the music has to change depending on what the player does. Like in a boss fight, if you hit the bad guy or whatever, the music has to pick up and then change if you didn't land a hit. Things have to change within real time, and it has to be determined by the input the player puts into the game. So it can get very complex. And you even see games larger industry games where the music isn't that interactive, And the reason for that is, at least I would assume, is a lot of times the composers aren't really game composers in a way. They maybe did film or something like that, but they're not familiar with how video games function and how video game music needs to function. Whereas in the indie world, if someone's scoring a video game, they probably really like video games and probably know their stuff. So there's been some games out there, like this game Fossil, scored by John Matz, who John Matz is a cool dude. I didn't realize this, but he did some of the music for like Freddie W videos back in the day, so I've been listening to him long before I found Fossil. But I was looking into really advanced interaction in video games, in video game music, during my senior year when I was working on my video game music thesis or whatever. But I found the music from Fossil, and I was like watching cutscenes from it and such, and I swear to you, I cannot tell where the music cuts and restarts and transitions. It's so seamless. It's just beyond amazing how interactive that music is. And that's not to say that interactive music is only in indie games. There's like, you know, big name people in the video game industry that have put out some like really awesome music. Like Super Mario Odyssey has insanely good interactive music. But it is really cool to see what people on such a low budget are able to pull off in the indie world. And it's not just Fossil, like Doki Doki Literature Club actually had really good interactive music. Not as many people talk about that, but even like depending on which character you're talking to in the game, it uses something called vertical layering or vertical crossfading, where as you're speaking to different characters, the instrumentation of the music changes. The music doesn't change, but the instruments that are playing the music do change. And it helps to kind of link you to different characters better. In the game Journey, that came out in 2012, that music uses what's called horizontal resequencing really, really well. So there'll be moments where like you're in the air and the music is like set something up and it holds a note and then it hits right when you land on the ground or something. It's super cool how it follows the action, you know, with this play-by-play sort of mentality. And there's lots of other really good examples of how indie games do this. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate most about indie games, is just, you know, how much advanced knowledge and skill goes into creating the music for them, in addition to creating the games, of course. So, those are some of my thoughts on indie game music. Let me know if there's an indie game that you really like down in the comments, and some of its music, and maybe why you like that music. I'd love to look into it. I need to play more and explore some other projects people have worked on in the past. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.